everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Castle Rock Microwave Aurora Deployment's Best Practices. I would like to introduce today's presenters, Brett Bonomo, CEO of Castle Rock Microwave, and Ray Savage, the Director of Product Marketing at Cambium Networks. Before we start, I do want to encourage everyone to ask any questions you may have during the presentation in the Questions tab in the control panel. But without further ado, I will go ahead and pass it on over to you, Ray.
Thanks very much, Riley. Thanks for joining us today. There's a lot of interest in multi-gigabit capacity wireless communications, and Brett Bonomo and his team at Castle Rock Microwave have just completed a significant municipal installation in downtown Aurora, Colorado. And we are honored to have you with us here today, Brett.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Riley. My name is Brett Bonomo, and I'm the founder and CEO of Castle Rock Microwave. Roughly 15 of my 20 years in my career were spent in the manufacturing of broadband wireless and microwave radio equipment. Prior to that, I did a short stint at a wireless internet service provider around the year 2000. But since that period, in about 2014, I started my company, Castle Rock Microwave, and made an exhilarating leap into self-employment. And since that time, we have really galvanized ourselves as the regional wireless system integrator, bridging the digital divide. And part of that is building broadband wireless networks. And the other part of it is addressing mission critical applications and needs for a number of different market verticals: traditional enterprise applications, utility companies, transportation organizations, and public safety. So we truly are a turnkey organization providing design, survey, fulfillment, deployment, monitoring, and maintenance services. My personal purpose is to have empowered employees that drive growth and create delighted customers and develop sustainability for our customers and for our organization. You can go ahead and advance one more, please, Riley. Thank you. So the challenge for Aurora, to be completely frank, this project happened in somewhat of a frenzy. Consideration and planning began in 2019 to start addressing an aging wireless infrastructure of 802.11 based and first, second gen 60 gigahertz radios that the city had deployed to the tune of about just over 30 hops. And they were pretty widely distributed across the city. The primary applications were enterprise, extending the corporate LAN with video and voice, internal internet access, their private applications, some public safety applications, and of course, the burgeoning free public Wi-Fi that the city provides in park areas and public areas. The capacity of those systems were roughly typically in the 50 megabit per second range, with the older 60 gigahertz radios being up to 500 megabits per second. And the city's desire was really to have gigabit to 1 gigabit to 10 gigabit capacity throughout their entire infrastructure, including the wireless equipment. But like most cities and public entities, they have a very limited staff available to address outside plant needs. And don't misunderstand me, they are well resourced in terms of really smart, capable people, but there are only so many to go around. And the next bullet, the CARES Act part of this, well, let me just jump into that. Part of what drove this project in a frenzy was access and availability of CARES Act funding. And when the city realized that they had this opportunity to upgrade this infrastructure, there were 3 or 4 other infrastructure projects happening at the same time. So this created a challenge in terms of staffing to address the prior comments I was making. So they were just really spread thin is the bottom line. And they needed someone to come in, come alongside them, partner with them, and help them be successful in this endeavor to upgrade their wireless infrastructure. Additionally, we engaged with the city late last year, probably in the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter. And initially, the goal was to have the project done by the end of calendar year 2020. Having just a quarter to get finish the design, survey all the sites, Again, keep in mind there's roughly 32 hops. Procure all the equipment, stage all the equipment, and then get people out to install the equipment and get it commissioned. So not a lot of time. There was some light at the end of the tunnel and the silver lining in that we did get some grace and an extension into the new year. But we were pushing to have the project done by the end of last year.
Brett, there's a lot of folks that are looking for projects right now. And, you know, obviously something like this is significant. It's also a challenge, as you mentioned. How did the project come to you? How did you find out about it?
You know, we, over the last few years, have just developed a relationship with the city of Aurora. But also, you know, we have a really strong team of folks here at Castle Rock Microwave whose job it is to stay aware of what's going on around us, where the funding is going, and that's so vitally important in understanding, you know, how folks are spending this money. You know, who has the existing wireless systems, who has the old existing wireless systems. These are all things that we look for as an organization to understand cycles and activity. This, you know, our relationship with the city of Aurora actually started because of a need they had for several relatively long point-to-point licensed Part 101 microwave links where we plugged in Cambium. And that's really where our relationship started.
Great. And I see Ryan has already posted a question here about the cost. Let's talk about the solution first, and Ryan will come back to your question.
Great. The last thing I just want to mention as it relates to some of the challenge, or one of the maybe most notable challenge for Aurora was, of course, COVID revealed a lack of connectivity even in the urban corridors for some of their students who are on free and reduced lunch programs and in opportunity zones. Very specifically, they had kids with, you know, 1 or 2 working parents who couldn't be properly supervised, and the city developed the ability to open up some public places with appropriate social distancing and supervision to allow kids to come and do the remote learning with computers at a city facility. And so that was one of the key drivers of this project, because they needed to be able to do that for their constituents. So how is this plan against alternatives? Well, fiber, in order to use the funding that was available, fiber would have taken too long. It was simply out of the question. The same is generally true of lease lines. You know, take a long time to get their, you know, Metro Ethernet. Fiber isn't available everywhere to lease. They really wanted a single source supplier and solution. I mentioned they already had Cambium Part 101 microwave solutions in place, and CN Wave was being released at a perfect time relative to this project happening, both CN Wave and the PTP 850 product at 80 gigahertz. So that's actually a good point. Well, I'll get to that in a minute, I suppose. But an important part of this solution was designing, and we designed all the paths for 60 and 80 gigahertz. All the paths were roughly 2 miles or less. And as a general rule, the paths less than a half a mile for sure, but mostly in the 0 to 0.3 of a mile range, ended up being 60 gigahertz. From roughly 0.3 or half of a mile to 2 miles were 80 gigahertz.
Great.
Yeah. And then, of course, you know, we wanted to put in a solution that would facilitate future broadband growth. So while the city isn't, as far as I know, currently considering, you know, public broadband solution, the CN Wave with its mesh capabilities would absolutely facilitate the ability to quickly go and build into an opportunity zone or into an area of need to help spread broadband to folks to facilitate remote learning, telehealth, workforce development, etc.
Now, I've heard somebody say that mesh gives you the ability to go around corners and around obstructions. Was that part of the plan, or?
You know, we did not deploy any links using mesh exactly, but we did leverage the point to multipoint capabilities of CN Wave. Yeah, one of the things I'll talk a little bit about, I'll address it on the next slide as it relates to what the installation was like and some considerations. I will just say that you absolutely have to have line of sight to make 60 and 80 gigahertz work. But mesh does give you a lot of flexibility, and we're leveraging that in other deployments in other areas. So as I mentioned, things happened a bit in a frenzy and needed to move very quickly. And there were a lot of things that had to be considered, not the least of which was access to the sites. And all the sites, I believe, all the sites are owned by the city, but by different stakeholders in the city. And sometimes that takes some careful coordination and maneuvering and negotiating relationships and timing to get in and get on the towers and the rooftops. That was definitely a challenge, but everybody cooperated. It just takes time. Obviously, since we were working at the end, near the end of the year in Denver, Aurora, near Denver, in Colorado, we had to we had to work around weather delays. I already mentioned the short deadlines and the design criteria that we use for 60 and 80 gigahertz on all these links. There was a lot that needed to be done to alert and prepare the supply chain. cnWave was not exactly shipping when we got this project. It wasn't commercially available. It was literally within weeks of becoming commercially available. Cambium was great in stepping up and helping us prioritize this project so that we could get equipment on hand. We found that the PTP850E gear was readily available in the supply chain, but it's not just the radios we need, right? We need steel for mounts. We needed cable, connectors, fiber, SFPs, and the list goes on and on. And one of the things we pride ourselves at Castle Rock Microwave is understanding the supply chain because of my background or our background in microwave manufacturing and knowing how to leverage that in our favor. And it proved to really work out well at the end of the day. Fortunately, all the radios have a familiar GUI, and it's a familiar platform or form factor because we've deployed a lot of Cambium gear. So it's a relatively short and shallow learning curve. Perhaps the biggest issue or two that we had to figure out was alignment. We have definitely deployed millimeter wave prior to this. It was the first time with the cnWave 60 gigahertz gear. And in our experience and estimation, we needed to align things like we would a typical microwave link for optimized received signal level. And what we found is that attempting that wasn't the best approach. So if you take nothing else away from this talk, hear me when I say you have to align it visually and buy the doggone inexpensive scope. It will save you time and probably money in the long run. But what you see in this photo is kind of a fun, maybe not beautiful or great, but a fun photo one of our guys, our construction manager, took looking through the scope and the crosshairs to get the link aligned, get the link up, and then tweak it for alignment. And there were a couple of iterations going back and forth between both radios that we learned that we had to do to get it to lock in well, but use the scope, use visual alignment. Our customer did not yet have IPv6 deployed in the field, and cnWave does rely pretty heavily on IPv6. But one of the great features of the Cambium radios is that you can put it in an IPv4 mode, and that mode works in both point-to-point and point-to-multipoint, specifically for the cnWave product. The PTP850E 80 gigahertz radio is a traditional layer 2 radio, no surprises there. But we kind of had to figure it out for cnWave. Maintaining continuity and dialogue with the City of Aurora staff was vitally important because, like I said, they had multiple other projects going on. And in order to meet their security requirements, we had to be escorted at all times. So our escort typically had other things going on, and we just had to coordinate very carefully. So we had daily check-ins with him face-to-face. We had daily status updates at the end of each day showing progress via photos and short summaries. And then we had a weekly staff call with our staff and their CIO to give kind of where we've been, what we accomplished, where we're going. We'd send everyone an updated schedule at the end of each week, and all that helped us stay in alignment. I'll take a quick deep breath for a second, Ray, in case you've got any questions for me.
Yeah, sure. We did have a question. Neil is asking in the photo that you've got there, specifically, what scope are you recommending to use for alignment?
Oh, that's a great question. So Cambium, I believe, has a scope. Well, I got to be careful because I went through this myself and I had to find it, and I'm drawing a blank. I believe Cambium has a scope in the cnWave price list. Your distributor should be able to provide you direction. I would be happy to provide additional information as a follow-up, Neil, if maybe reach out via LinkedIn, or I think I forgot to put my contact information in the slide deck. But I'd be happy to dig that up. I will be honest, I actually think also at one point our construction manager went over to Cabela's and came back with a scope in his hand. And it turned out that it was, I believe, a standard mounting adapter. So let me say this differently. You can buy a mounting adapter for the cnWave radio that facilitates the mount of a scope. So you need this attachment that goes on the radio. And I believe at that point, it gives you a universal fitting for pretty much any rifle scope. And I believe that to be true. And I am uncertain, though, if the scope you see here is a off-the-shelf commercially available scope from Cabela's or was something we got from our distributor.
Okay, thanks very much, Brett.
Yeah, there's nothing real special about it.
Did you use the Link Planner software or the heat mapping CN Heat software at any point in your planning?
We used Link Planner extensively for planning of this network. And we went through many, many iterations of Link Planner to get it, get the system right to where we wanted it and help alert us of paths that were perhaps too long or might indicate issues. The most important thing we did, frankly, though, was going out and surveying every site and every path and documenting potential obstructions in the paths. We did not use CN Heat. I don't believe CN Heat is currently relevant for the millimeter wave solutions. I hope I'm not wrong about that. I'm not talking out of place. So just a couple of last notes. I already kind of talked about supply chain, but diligence and accuracy in getting the right equipment on time was huge. We pride ourselves also on as-built and closeout documentation. So we spent a lot of time and energy on getting all of that information correct, because then our customers need to take that, get the radios entered into their monitoring platform, which we'll talk a little bit more about on this slide. And then the last step for us in the deployment was customer acceptance. So we literally had the customer with us at the end of every link to accept the link. We did speed tests. We looked at the received signal level. We confirmed all radios had all the entitlements required at the start of the project. And that's pretty standard operating procedure for us. So the results are that we improved connectivity for 32 links. I was thinking about it this morning, and I put 40 endpoints in here, and something isn't adding up there. So I've got to go back. I don't know why I've got 40 endpoints on my brain, but it seems like it would have to be less than 40 endpoints if there's 30 links, because some of the link endpoints are shared. But I know that we originally designed 32 links. I think 31 got deployed. The last one had a line of sight issue. We ended up with 1.8 to 10 gigabit per second of capacity on all the links. We completed the project on time and under budget, which is pretty exciting. And we were able to leave some money in the budget for other projects that the CIO had in mind. We implemented the Cambium NMS for the PTP 850 links, and we have been enabling the customer to perhaps deploy CN Maestro, but in the meantime, they do have an SNMP based monitoring platform that currently alerts them on other things. So they've implemented the radios into that current platform, but the goal longer term is to implement CN Maestro to get all the functionality of that with the cnWave product. Perhaps, the
Now, Brett.
left or yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, who will be doing the monitoring? And I think that's always an issue and there are many different options. It could be something turnkey for the city, which they own and operate. It could be something where they look back to you to be a managed service provider to do the maintenance and operation of it. There are many different contractual ways to set that up. How is this one done?
So we pursue all projects as though we will have the opportunity to maintain and monitor the solution that we deploy. But we understand also that a lot of our customers have this capability and want to do it themselves. We have a proposal in front of the customer now to maintain the system for them with a service level agreement. They currently, and if that comes to fruition, or as it comes to fruition, they part of that is us getting access to monitoring because it's in everybody's best interest. So that's something we're working on today. We do monitor and maintain other clients' networks. This happened in such a hurry and at such a high rate or fast rate that we're still kind of unpacking what maintenance and monitoring looks like going forward. When you deploy this many links in such a short amount of time, we've even found that there are a couple of links where we have some peculiar behavior that initially we attributed to snow. Basically, today's a snowy day in Colorado, and so we usually get a phone call and they could say, hey, a link went down but came back up and the SFP isn't talking. And we are just ironing out some final details, but it appears as though what's interesting is the links that go down and come back up are not the longest links. So it's not systematic, it's not system wide, the issues. It's right now limited to 2 or 3 links, and we're just working through those issues, and they've been very cooperative in knowing that it's part of the learning process too when you deploy this quickly.
I think a lot of service providers are used to tall towers and long ranges, and the equipment being hung very high up. And it looks like here they're not particularly high. I know you've got short range because of the millimeter wave. Were there a lot of things to adjust to in the installation process with?
One of the things to prepare yourself for in an installation like this, to your point, Ray, because everything isn't up on a tower, is aesthetics. And I say that kind of as people perhaps look at these photos and go, well, there's nothing real pretty about the side of that building with 2 attachments or multiple attachments hanging off. And you're right, but the reality of it is you have to think ahead a little bit, because eventually somebody in the parts department or in facilities is going to come back and say, hey, this kind of sticks out. The reality of it is a lot of what you see here, we installed, where you see the 2 gentlemen here installing radios. They're getting the new system up before they take the old equipment down. But do plan for aesthetics, to your point, Ray, because the equipment is going lower than on traditional microwave links where it's going up on a tower. The top photo you see of the 850E, the back of the 850E radio on the dish, that actually is up on a tower about 95 feet up on a tower. So we had deployments on 3 traditional lattice towers, the rest were on rooftops or side of buildings. This was actually another challenge, and touches on a challenge that we had to work around, and I totally spaced it until now. Every single link had to be deployed for a hot cutover. In other words, we did not have the flexibility to take any link down to bring a new link up. And that created some challenges, as did the city being in a upgrade of their network infrastructure equipment. So they were also in the process of they had to get out ahead of us, replace switches, make sure they were provisioned, configured, so that we could come in, install the new equipment next to the existing equipment and do a hot cutover. And some of their customers, so to speak, were much more sensitive to that than others. And you can see this photo with the structure with the big letter A on it, and this represents a large park in the city where there were a lot of structures like this that we had interconnected to provide free Wi-Fi throughout this very large part that's popular in the city for public Wi-Fi. So to kind of wrap up the what are the results, we've finished the project strong. As I mentioned, we're still we did some very purposeful training with the customer at the end of the project, which they appreciated and gave them the ability to understand what they now had on their network. And in the end, we were able to facilitate remote learning for students in opportunity zones and at a time of COVID when all learning is remote.
And Brett, one of the issues that's really hot right now is the homework gap and the federal funding that's available for community broadband. This is providing hotspots and access. Some of the community broadband challenges are talking about providing the connectivity right into the homes of the students. Have you seen any interest on projects like that?
We absolutely have, and we are on the edge of a project. We hope multiple, but one that comes to mind on the Front Range here in Colorado, Denver metropolitan area, where the school district has engaged with the local provider to connect students on free and reduced lunch programs. And we have been courted as the wireless portion of that. And we are looking, preliminary designs have been used with the CN Wave solution, as well as the CN Ranger CBRS or CN Medusa 3 CBRS solution. So I'm hoping we have a lot more to say about that, but we are feeling a strong, very soon, but we are feeling a strong pull into those types of projects and having a lot of conversations about it.
Yeah, and I'm sure many folks in the audience and many service providers are at the same place where there's a lot of interest. Funding is there, just as you ran into here. The funding is time critical, and you need to be able to develop solutions. Is this a good time to get back to Ryan's question about the typical cost? And I know every project is different. And so when a customer approaches you and asks about the cost of a generic solution, let's say to replace and upgrade their existing infrastructure, what is the best answer you can give that sets you up for success?
Yeah, let me think a little bit about that. Of course, there's, I answer that question with a lot more questions. What are the backhaul mechanisms, and how long are these links, and what really is going to be the best solution? A mesh 60 gigahertz Terragraph type solution, or a fixed wireless multi-point solution like CN Ranger or CN Medusa. I think it's safe to say that in the scope of providing connectivity, fixed wireless connectivity in a non-60 gigahertz solution, the cost is going to be in the 10 to 20,000 range for the base station, and subscribers are in the hundreds of dollars range. The model changes with 60 gigahertz because of the mesh capabilities, and this is actually something we're wrestling a little bit with some of our solutions. Is should the last mile, so to speak, the last 100 feet be Wi-Fi or 60 gigahertz?
Yeah.
And this is something we're wrestling with, because these students we're trying to reach, or the elderly, or the disadvantaged, are they've already got the phones, right? They've got Wi-Fi devices, and many of us know and understand the cost of rolling a truck to deploy a subscriber unit on somebody's home. In doing Wi-Fi for the last half block or so changes the economics a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, so you know, I don't know how to be more specific than that. You know, the pricing on the for the Cambium equipment is readily available on the partner portal or from the distributors and resellers.
Okay, and Ryan, I hope that responds to your question. Obviously, if you want to go into details, you know, you can either reach out to Brett offline, or certainly one of our Cambium folks can help you out.
Yeah, I just mentioned I unintentionally left my contact information off the slide, but I'm available on LinkedIn, and happy to connect and share, you know, experience, share our thoughts and give you some hints and tricks. I did bring my tap shoes, Ray, if you need me to dance or anything.
I think we're good. Let's see. I think you mentioned snow as a possible issue. And I know in Colorado this spring you've had some heavy snows, even as recently as last night. Has the weather been any problem with the 60 gigahertz equipment?
You know, I think that's something we're still learning, and I was concerned about it maybe on our longer paths that are beyond or near that 0.3 of a mile range. I'm starting to believe that the snow itself or momentary outages or reductions in capacity isn't exactly the issue. It's some behavior on the networking side that is a result of or a consequence of the snow and the link having this change in capacity or you know, going away just momentarily. And that's something that we're unpacking right now, and that we're getting to the bottom of with the Cambium support group. But it's something that causes us to scratch our heads because occasionally it doesn't cause any problems, and then sometimes, you know, we'll learn there's a problem because a link likely went down because an SFP module needs to be effectively reset on a piece of network equipment. So I'm hopeful. I mean, I'm very hopeful and confident that it's just a matter of something that needs to be resolved, whether it's on the customer's networking equipment or it's a practice of ours, or maybe it's a future firmware upgrade or feature in the Cambium equipment. We're you know, is yet to be determined. And it's not system-wide, which is good news.
Okay. And at Castle Rock Microwave, you guys are communication specialists on multiple technologies. As you mentioned before, you're looking at using different ones for different locations. Do you ever get called inside the building to do Wi-Fi, either for enterprise or for residential applications?
Yeah, we do. We're to be frank and honest, it's a skill that it's a capability we absolutely have within the organization. The competitive landscape feels a little bit different to me in that environment. It's well within our capabilities, and it's something we need to pursue more of for sure. We are facilitating ourselves, you know, with a SPIN number to address E-rate needs and to utilize that funding mechanism to do more Wi-Fi work. And it's just a matter of us making it part of our everyday conversation. You know, we get pretty fired up and excited about outdoor wireless, but I'm challenging myself and my team to get as fired up to do indoor wireless.
Great. And Zach has a question for you. Since you've mentioned SFPs a few times as being a possible point of failure or an issue, were Cambium SFPs used, or was it a different vendor?
That's a great question. We have used, I believe they are all Cambium SFPs. We had near the beginning of the project, sorry, when I'm thinking, my eyes roll up and off the camera because I'm trying to recall, I'm thinking out loud. We had a delivery, I think we had a hard time getting the Cambium SFPs for a short amount of time, and we were able to source the same SFP from other sources. So there's probably a batch of non-cambium SFPs. And I can't say for sure. It's an interesting question. It's something we're digging into now to determine whether or not that could be related to the issue we've got. But by and large, we're using the cambium SFPs, and they're a pretty standard SFP.
Great, and it sounds like from a business perspective, it's absolutely a total success with City of Aurora. But have there been any of those moments where you got to see that people go, wow, this is really different, or wow, we're excited about it? We're outside of the project team, because I know this is an infrastructure project, so it really may not be something that end users would understand. But have there been any of those moments for you?
Yeah, we've had a few epiphanies. I mean, first of all, this project's created a lot of activity for us. It's one of the first, like, of its kind. It's certainly not the first. 60 gigahertz, 80 gigahertz has been around for a long time. But CN Wave is a little unique. In addition to creating activity with the industry, more specifically, some of the epiphanies have been places we can use this equipment that we maybe hadn't considered in the past. I've always kind of relegated 60 and 80 gigahertz to urban environments. And in working with more rural customers, we're still finding that in a lot of rural towns, the density of the people is around the water tank. It's around the source of the water and the grocery store. So we are starting to realize a lot more opportunity for CN Wave and 60 gigahertz and future Terragraph than what we initially considered. And people are catching on to that. And it's exciting because it's a gigabit plus solution.
Yeah. Matthew has a question for you. How has the overall stability of the cambium equipment been, in your opinion?
Yeah, I can tell you it's been it's been super solid. Like anybody, when you've got a new product in your hand, you're a little uneasy and nervous about how this is going to go. And we had it in our hands before documentation was readily available. Cambium was great. They recognized that we were an early adopter. They put us in direct contact with product line management and kind of gave us some engagement, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say rules, but they told us how to engage with them, and they kind of personally handed us the documentation we needed to get started. We quickly, because the nature of our team, got the equipment on the bench, set it up, and developed our own procedures to configure the radios, handed that to our tower crews, and they were just able to get the equipment up and running. We had to learn some of these alignment items early on, but other than that, it just worked. It just worked. And having had experience with the PTP platform prior to this, the PTP 820 platform prior to this, the PTP 850 was pretty much second nature. It was interesting. The radios, when they are deployed, it's hard to tell, but with the integrated antenna, you'd expect the PTP 850 radios to be in kind of a, if you can imagine the outdoor unit on the back of an antenna, it's oriented like this. That's with what I would call an external antenna, the 1 or 2 foot dish. When it's with the integrated antenna, it almost looks like it's slant polarized at 45 degrees. We didn't realize that at first. We had all of them, all the radios, integrated antennas mounted like this. And it wasn't until we were flipping through documentation. So there's some things you figure out along the way, but everything has been really solid. Yeah, I don't know what more to say about that.
Well, Brett, thank you for your time. Thanks for being available today. And for anybody that's attending, if you look on the handout section there, you will see the actual case study that we are publishing today that covers the Aurora, Colorado deployment installed by Castle Rock Microwave. And boy, part of the testimonial is having a great project. Part of having a great case study is actually having the City of Aurora quoted and endorsing a case study, because not many municipalities ever do that. So,
right,
for sharing your experience.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, and all my best to all the listeners. Thank you for your time.